If you've noticed that your body seems to be storing fat in completely different places than it used to, even though you haven't changed your diet or exercise routine, you're not imagining things. There's a real biological shift happening, and it has everything to do with estrogen. So let's talk about what's really going on, why it happens, and what you can actually do about it. We're going to break down the science of estrogen and fat storage in a way that actually makes sense. You'll understand why your body suddenly seems to be working against you, what visceral fat really is, and why doctors are concerned about it. And most importantly, what strategies actually work when your hormones have fundamentally changed the rules. Because once you understand the mechanism, you stop blaming yourself and start working with your body instead of against it. Let's start with what estrogen actually does when it comes to fat storage, because this hormone has been running the show your entire adult life, and you probably didn't even know it. Estrogen is like a traffic controller for fat cells. It doesn't just influence how much fat you store, but crucially, where you store it. Throughout your reproductive years, estrogen has been directing fat to accumulate in what's called subcutaneous areas. That's the fat just under your skin, mainly around your hips, thighs, and buttocks. Now, before you curse that hip and thigh fat, here's something important. That type of fat storage is actually protective. Subcutaneous fat is metabolically quiet. It sits there, it provides energy reserves, it cushions your body, but it doesn't interfere much with your metabolic health. In fact, some researchers call it safe fat storage. Estrogen also does something else that's critical. It helps regulate insulin sensitivity. It keeps your cells responsive to insulin, which means your body can efficiently process the food you eat without storing excess as fat. It also influences where and how your body burns fat for energy. But here's where everything changes. When you hit perimenopause and menopause, your estrogen levels don't just decrease, they plummet. For most women, estrogen drops by about 60 to 70% compared to their peak reproductive years. And when estrogen drops, that traffic controller essentially leaves the job. What happens next is where things get really interesting and a little frustrating, because your body doesn't stop storing fat. It just changes the address. Without adequate estrogen, your body starts behaving more like a male body in terms of fat distribution. And men, as you've probably noticed, tend to carry their weight around their midsection. This is where we need to talk about visceral fat and why your doctor suddenly seems very interested in your waist measurement. Visceral fat is completely different from the subcutaneous fat on your hips and thighs. This fat doesn't just sit under your skin. It accumulates deep in your abdominal cavity, surrounding your internal organs, your liver, pancreas, intestines, and even your heart. Think of it this way. Subcutaneous fat is like insulation on the outside of your house. Visceral fat is like insulation that somehow got inside your walls, wrapping around your electrical system and plumbing. It's in the wrong place, and it starts interfering with normal operations. Visceral fat is metabolically active and not in a good way. It releases inflammatory compounds called cytokines. It secretes hormones that can interfere with insulin function. It essentially creates a low-grade inflammatory state in your body that affects everything from your cardiovascular health to your risk of diabetes. Studies show that postmenopausal women can experience a 15 to 20% increase in visceral fat, even without gaining overall weight. Let me say that again, you can weigh the same on the scale, but have significantly more dangerous fat than you did before. This is why your pants suddenly don't fit the same way. This is why your waist thickens even if your arms and legs look the same. The fat is literally redistributing from safer storage areas to more problematic ones. And there's another player in this story that makes everything worse: cortisol. When estrogen drops, cortisol, your stress hormone, suddenly has more influence over fat storage. And cortisol's favorite place to store fat? You guessed it, your belly. So now you've got low estrogen removing the protective pattern of hip and thigh storage, while cortisol is actively promoting abdominal fat accumulation. If you've been under chronic stress during perimenopause or menopause, this double effect can be particularly pronounced. Now, if you're thinking, great, so my hormones have betrayed me and there's nothing I can do, hold on. Because understanding this mechanism actually gives you power. But first, you need to know about the insulin connection. Here's where the estrogen decline creates a cascade effect that goes beyond just fat storage location. Remember how estrogen helps maintain insulin sensitivity? When estrogen drops, your cells become more resistant to insulin. This means when you eat carbohydrates, even healthy ones, your body has a harder time efficiently shuttling that glucose into your cells for energy. Instead, your blood sugar stays elevated longer, your pancreas has to produce more insulin to compensate, and all that excess insulin signals your body to store fat. And where does it preferentially store it now? Yep, your abdomen. This is why women often notice that foods they ate without problem for decades suddenly seem to cause weight gain after 50. Your metabolic response to those foods has fundamentally changed. There's also a shift in how your body uses energy. With lower estrogen, your resting metabolic rate tends to decrease. Some studies suggest women can experience a drop of 100 to 200 calories per day in their basal metabolic rate during the menopause transition. That might not sound like much, but over a month, that's 3,000 to 6,000 fewer calories burned just existing. Over a year, that's potentially 10 to 20 pounds of weight gain if nothing else changes. And here's the kicker. Muscle mass naturally declines with age, about 3 to 8% per decade after 30, and the rate accelerates after 50. Since muscle is metabolically active tissue that burns calories even at rest, losing muscle means your metabolism slows even further, so you've got lower estrogen, increased insulin resistance, decreased metabolic rate, and muscle loss all happening simultaneously. No wonder it feels like your body has completely changed the rules overnight. But here's what you need to understand. Your body isn't broken. It's responding to a new hormonal environment. And when you work with that reality instead of against it, you can actually influence how this plays out. Let's talk about strategies that address the actual mechanisms we've discussed, not generic advice that doesn't account for your changing hormones. Strength training becomes non-negotiable. I know you've heard lift weights 1,000 times, but here's why it's different now. You're fighting muscle loss that's accelerated by low estrogen. Resistance training is the only thing that actually builds and maintains muscle mass. And more muscle means higher metabolic rate, better insulin sensitivity, and less visceral fat accumulation. Studies specifically on postmenopausal women show that regular strength training can reduce visceral fat by up to 10%, even without significant weight loss. You don't need to become a bodybuilder. 2 to 3 sessions per week, focusing on compound movements that work multiple muscle groups, can make a real difference. Protein becomes your priority. With lower estrogen, your body is less efficient at building and maintaining muscle. You need more protein now than you did at 30, not less. Research suggests postmenopausal women benefit from 1.2 to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight daily. That's roughly 25 to 30 grams of protein per meal if you're eating 3 times a day. This isn't about eating more overall. It's about shifting your macros to prioritize protein at every meal. This helps preserve muscle, stabilizes blood sugar, and increases satiety so you're less likely to overeat. Carbohydrate quality and timing matter more. Remember that insulin resistance we talked about? You can work with it instead of against it. This doesn't mean you have to go low carb or keto unless that works for you. But it does mean being strategic. Focus on complex carbohydrates with fiber, vegetables, legumes, whole grains. Save your carbohydrate intake for around exercise, when your insulin sensitivity is naturally higher. Many women find that reducing refined carbohydrates and sugars makes a significant difference in how they feel and how their body responds, simply because their insulin sensitivity has changed. Movement throughout the day. Visceral fat responds particularly well to overall physical activity, not just structured exercise. Breaking up sedentary time with movement helps improve insulin sensitivity and reduces the signals that promote abdominal fat storage. This could be as simple as a 10-minute walk after meals, which research shows can significantly improve blood sugar control in postmenopausal women. Sleep and stress management aren't optional. Remember cortisol? When you're sleep-deprived or chronically stressed, cortisol stays elevated, directly promoting visceral fat accumulation. Studies show that women who sleep less than 6 hours per night have significantly more visceral fat than those who sleep 7 to 8 hours. And chronic stress has been directly linked to increased waist circumference in postmenopausal women. This isn't soft advice, it's biochemistry. Managing stress through whatever methods work for you and prioritizing consistent sleep directly influences where your body stores fat. Consider hormone replacement therapy, HRT. This is a personal medical decision that should be made with your healthcare provider, but it's worth understanding the data. Studies show that women who use hormone replacement therapy during the menopause transition tend to have less visceral fat accumulation compared to those who don't. HRT can help maintain more favorable fat distribution, preserve insulin sensitivity, and protect muscle mass. If you're a candidate for HRT and it aligns with your health profile, it can be a powerful tool for managing these metabolic changes. But this requires individual assessment. What's right for one woman isn't right for everyone. By the way, if this kind of practical, science-based information about navigating midlife health changes is helpful to you, we dive deep into these topics regularly here at Elevated Woman Lab. We're building a community of women who want to understand their bodies and make informed decisions based on actual science, not trends. Here's what I want you to take away from all of this. The changes in fat storage patterns after 50 aren't a personal failure. They're a predictable physiological response to declining estrogen. But, and this is crucial, they're not inevitable in their severity. How this plays out for you individually depends partly on genetics, yes, but significantly on how you respond to your new hormonal reality. The women who do best through this transition are the ones who recognize that what worked at 35 might not work at 55. They're willing to adjust their approach based on what their body actually needs now, not what it needed 2 decades ago. This might mean more protein than you're used to eating, more strength training than you've ever done, better sleep habits than you maintained when you were younger and could get away with less, more intentional stress management, different carbohydrate choices. It's also worth noting that some visceral fat accumulation is normal with aging. The goal isn't to fight against every natural change, it's to keep visceral fat within healthy ranges where it's not significantly impacting your metabolic health. Your waist circumference is actually a better indicator of health risk than your weight. For women, a waist circumference above 35 inches is associated with increased health risks. This is a more useful metric to track than the number on the scale. The estrogen shift changes the game, but it doesn't end it. Your body is adapting to a new phase of life, and yes, that includes changes in fat storage patterns. The shift from hip and thigh storage to abdominal storage is real, it's driven by hormones, and it comes with legitimate health implications. But now you understand the mechanism. You know it's not about willpower or simply eating less and moving more. It's about insulin sensitivity, muscle preservation, strategic nutrition, and working with your hormonal reality. The most empowering thing you can do is stop comparing your body now to your body at 30. That version of you had completely different hormones running the show. Your body now needs a different approach, not a more extreme version of what used to work. Strength training to preserve muscle, adequate protein to support that muscle, smart carbohydrate choices to work with your insulin sensitivity, stress management and sleep to control cortisol. And for some women, hormone replacement therapy to support overall metabolic health. These aren't restrictions, they're adaptations. They're how you partner with your body through this transition instead of fighting against it. The visceral fat shift is real, but it's not irreversible. With the right strategies that address the actual hormonal changes happening in your body, you can influence how this story unfolds. If you found this breakdown helpful and want more content that actually explains the why behind what's happening in your body after 50, not just surface-level tips, make sure you're subscribed to Elevated Woman Lab. We're here to give you the science-backed information you need to make informed choices about your health. And if you know someone who's frustrated with unexplained weight changes during perimenopause or menopause, share this with them. Understanding what's actually happening can completely change how you approach it. Your body isn't broken, it's just playing by different rules now. And once you know the rules, you can learn to work with them.